terrible-faced, horrible with disheveled-haired and 4 arms, divine, adorned with a necklace of sliced-off heads, holding in her 2 left hands a freshly hacked head and a cleaver, and in her right displaying the fear not and boon-bestowing hand gestures, lustrously black like a large cloud, and robed with nothing but the sky, anointed with blood dripping down from the necklace of heads at her throat, terrible because of the pair of children's corpses she wears for earrings, her teeth horrid and her face frightful, but her breasts high and uplifted, a skirt of cut arms hanging from her waist, laughter bellowing out, her face shining from the red stream dripping from the 2 corners of her mouth, shouting terribly, dwelling on the very fierce cremation grounds, her 3rd eye permeated with the newly risen sun, with fangs for teeth and a pearl necklace that swings to the right as she moves, sitting on the great lord who has taken the form of a corpse, surrounded by jackals and their terrible, all-pervading cries, engaging great time in the act of reversed sexual intercourse, her face happy and pleased like a lotus. He who thinks on Kali thus will have all his wishes fulfilled. This is a tantric dhanya, a spiritual poem used in Hindu Tantra to meditate upon a mentally constructed deity. This particular poem, originally written in Sanskrit, describes a medieval depiction of the Hindu goddess Kali. The goddess Kali is dark, fear-inducing. She has skin as black as night, a blood-red outstretched tongue dangling from her mouth, and bulging eyes. The origin of her name can be literally translated to either black or time, and some interpret this as meaning she is the god of death, or a god that lives beyond time. Kali's personality is wild, with an uncontrollable temper. There are many stories of her getting drunk off the blood of her enemies on the battlefield. Her most famous pose is that of her stepped on top of Shiva, where it is unclear whether he is sleeping or a corpse. At least, this is the Kali that is described in texts like the Mahabharata and other early Indian epics and Puranas. But we see in this video present-day Indians worshipping Kali at a temple. They are everyday people, not people on the fringe of society like Kali's character might suggest. So, how did this happen? How did a terrifying, wrathful goddess become one of the most worshipped deities in India today? To answer this question, we first take a look at Tantra. Tantra is difficult to define, but especially in what is known as left-handed Tantra, it consists of a variety of impure practices and rituals, such as the inclusions of blood and sex, or meditating inside a cremation ground. Practicers of Tantra use these unorthodox methods as ways of working towards moksha, or liberation from the cycle of birth. Beginning around the 11th century, practicers of Tantra enveloped the goddess Kali to represent what is called Shakti. Shakti literally translates to power, but it is often associated with a feminine power that works in duality with the male. This is known as the Shiva-Shakti dynamic. Kali, who was already associated with dark, left-handed mannerisms, was a perfect goddess to be worshipped in Tantra. She was elevated by Tantra, transformed from one of many goddesses to the goddess. Kali was no longer just a ferocious warrior on the battlefield, but as the essence of Shakti itself, she was now the supreme power and mother of the cosmos. But Tantra is not mainstream Hinduism. So how did this new image of the goddess Kali become mainstream? To take a look at the answer, we travel to Bengal in around the 15th century. It was at this time that Tantra gained a footing in Bengal. For about 200 years, Kali stayed a mostly tantric deity. But eventually, tantric practitioners extended their influence onto the common Hindu, and taking inspiration from tantric danyas, there began a great literary period of devotional poetry to Kali. These poems were particularly popular in the 18th and 19th centuries in Bengal, often heart-wrenching pieces filled with longing and desperation for salvation from Kali. They spoke like the feelings of a child who is looking for their mother. Indeed, Kali was their mother in the eyes of the poets. The following is a poem by Ramprasad Sen, possibly the most famous Bengali poet and Kali devotee. So, mind, you've decided to go on pilgrimage? If you abandon the nectar of Kali's lotus feet, you'll fall in a well and ruin yourself. Life is old age, sin, and disease. These are the sufferings they offer at Puri, Kashi, or do I mean a cough? Can kill you when you have a fever, and bathing at Tribeni will only make your sickness worse. Kali's name is a powerful medicine, the best prescription. Drink it with devotion. Oh, sing, drink. You'll become the self, delighting in yourself. Shiva is the Lord of death. If you serve him well, liberation will quickly follow. In him all things are possible, even you will merge with the Supreme. Prashad says, brother mind, you've traded the shade of the wish-filling tree for the roots of a thorn bush. Is this the way to lose the fear of death? The poem still enforced some of Kali's terrifying characteristics, but they also clothed her in a sheet of beauty. Kali was now terrible and awesome, all destructive but all powerful, a goddess propelling not only death, but also life, and those who worship her are destined to experience bliss. Raghunath Ray, another Bengali devotional poet, writes, for a devotee, she's a blessing who takes away fear. Her lowly one says, this is no ordinary being, but the risen form of the goddess whose essence is Brahman. Ramprasad Sen, in another of his poems, says, devotion is the only true way to worship her. You may do rituals to impress other people, but the mother won't be bribed. Many poems, like this one, encourage devotion to Kali over meaningless rituals. Although strict devotion itself is a tantric ideal, poets themselves eventually began to ironically shun other tantric practices in relation to Kali in their poetry. Tantra, once again, became a sect of Hinduism that lived on the edges of society, associated with practices that horrify most Hindus. Although Tantra left the mainstream, Kali Ma, or Mother Kali, was there to stay. Of course, that wasn't without some changes to her persona. Influence from the elite class, changes in artistic trends, demand for a more publicly accessible goddess, the presence of the British who encouraged more civilized representations, and the association of the goddess with the motherland of India. These are all factors that altered the image of Kali. She was no longer a bloodthirsty warrior. Kali was a beautiful mother whose menacing garments and weapons only represented the power she was capable of. Her figure became curvy, skin blue, eyes proportional in size, mouth curled into a smile, and tongue shrinked in size, suggesting not that she was yelling in rage, but instead shyly embarrassed at herself. Kali's whole image was not lost. She is still associated with her wrath and ferocity, but that image is complemented with an equally powerful notion that Kali is also motherly and loving. And it is precisely for that reason that, I believe, the goddess Kali is so appealing today. Her duality in nature that persists to this day allows a widely interpretable concept of her worship. Tantric practitioners of sadhaka who seek to embrace the forbidden can take a fearless stance before her as they meditate in a cremation ground. But, equally valid, a simple devotee can fall to Kali's feet as her child, begging for her grace. To either worshipper, Kali's underlying dark energy provides some perspective, and maybe some comfort, within a chaotic universe. Her all-capable power is so alluring that it begs for untethered devotion. Kali was first elevated as a goddess in her spiritual role through Tantra, and then in her social role through poetry and politics. In short, the image that Kali has become is reflected in everything and everyone. And it is for that reason that her adoration is so satisfying and prominent today.